let's talk about Silent Titans by Patrick Stuart. So this, that's the RPG author, not the actor. So this is a 2019 book published by Swordfish Islands, and it's designed for Into the Odd. Now, Into the Odd is a simplified D&D clone. So for instance, rather than there being 6 core stats, there are 3 core stats, and a few other things like that. You know, there are no to-hit rolls. Damage happens automatically, but is negated by armor. So you have a far simpler combat resolution system. And this book, which is an adventure or campaign, really it's a module, has a simplified version or a summarized version of the Into the Odd rules on this 2-sided bookmark, which is a pretty good summary of it, and definitely does the job you need it to. This is also explicitly an Into the Odd adventure in terms of its world. Wir-Heal, the land of Silent Titans, is connected by something called the Demon Bone Train to Bastion, which you are told to go and find details of in the latest edition of Into the Odd, Electric Bastion Land, which came out after this, which I might review at some point as well, but is the kind of the capital city of Chris McDowell's Into the Odd world, which is attached to the rules, of course. So this is in the same world as that. It also connects itself to various other settings, such as an adventure David McGrogan hasn't yet released, Into the Rushes, which sounds interesting from what I've read about it, and a few other adventures as well. And in fact, you know, it says just to add other OSR products to the setting if you need them. So it's connected to the OSR land, particularly the Into the Odd land. And it also has a character generation table to connect your Into the Odd. So it tells you how to create characters, and then it says, now you know what your character's highest stat and hit points are. They also give you a big chart of characters to cross-reference. So it sets you up to play pretty quickly. I'll quickly give a couple of examples of these because they're fun. Oidwald Cow King, who has a woodsman's axe, a saw, an animal trap, a bipolar would-be diabolist, nature hater, and a cow. Or again, India Flips, blackjack, throwing knives, hidden butterfly knife, silk rope, expert gymnast and contortionist, charming, seems harmless, 16 years old. And there's some other ones too. Maybe the best, Sir Colgrin Cador the Pure, and like magically transformed into an orangutan. He cannot speak, but his heart is true. That is the result if you get the best possible stats. Your best stat is 18 and your hit point value is maximum at first level 6. So yeah, you quickly get your characters and you move on. And this is basically an adventure where the dreams and terrors of sleeping titans, kind of creational principles, bleed into the surrounding land and cause various kinds of chaos, such as humans can't go into this land without gradually mutating into plant creatures or things, wood woes. And it's mythically based. The Wir-Heal is mythically based on where Patrick comes from in England, the Wirral, and the Titans are in fact what make up the Wirral. Their 5 bodies which have been put there make up the Wirral or Wir-Heal, and they sleep uneasily until their time has come. They're trying to regenerate themselves and wake up, and that's the situation into which you're thrown. I'll get to that in a minute, but that's the basic setup, is you're ending up in this kind of slightly crazy dreamland. And there is a mainland section, which is more normalish, and then there are 5 regions in the Wir-Heal, which are the Sleeping Titans, and there are 2 other additional places, basically. But your characters start, one of those additional places, your characters start by falling into an adventure called, well, a setting or an adventure called Dementia Bomb. And this is a confusing battle with someone, Dr. Hogg, who's a pig, who seems to know you, and he's fought you before, and he's now trying to finish off, and you're interfering yet again, but you don't know who you are. You've been dragged from across time and space. You might be, for instance, John Frost with a brace of flintlock pistols and vicar's clothes, a highwayman who pretends to be a vicar, or vice versa, or a Whom the Phoenician with a Xiphos sword. You know, you've been dragged from somewhere, and suddenly you're fighting this pig in this weird setup of a agglomeration of weird things connected to the skull of Kronos, something to do with the nature of time. Who knows what's going on? And this is your first session or half session. It's a small dungeon-like environment with a variety of monsters, a variety of traps or obstacles. And this is an incredible hook for a campaign, and it's just the first thing you get to really in the main setting of it. It sets up a kind of closed campaign with set objectives. You are dragged from across time and space, you're going to do this. You don't need to do this, you could create into the odd characters normally and just set them up some other way, and that's perfectly normal and natural too, but you would miss out on this first adventure. It also introduces you, I think, to some of the usability issues. So the layout itself is fine, I mean, as in you can read the sections, and it's maybe over bullet pointed, but some people will probably say, no, I think it's perfectly bullet pointed. Over bullet pointing can break up information more, ironically, than you want. It can end up being that you're kind of like reading down to just find anything that makes you understand what's happened in the top bullet point. But its layout is fine and pretty functional, I think. But like other works by Patrick Stuart, you have to work out what's going on, and you have to work out how to use the material yourself. It doesn't say how. First, you should start with Dementia Bomb, and that's how your characters will be introduced, and then they could choose where to travel. There is some degree of throwing the DM into the deep end, and though there are things set up to help you make this a slightly easier first game, this is not a first game, and maybe that's a shame. I'll come back to that, but it's not a disaster, it's just a thing. The map also requires a bit of discernment and deciphering. But then, anyway, it's beautiful, by the way. All the art in this by Dechtweiler is great. Then you've got some semi-functional mainland. So you go through that bit, you do Dementia Bomb, you're dumped off somewhere else, and you've got, by the way, on the note of the artwork, that's a kind of map of the world. So, you, not the only map of the world, I'll get to that in a second, but you start in a place called Ellesmere, based on Ellesmere Port, and this is a port connected to the kind of essentially semi-unnavigable seas and the canals that don't work anymore due to the chaos power and stuff. And there's some greater NPCs, and their words and actions and the environments, like the paintings on their boats and stuff, all begin to give you a hint of this great mystery that has dragged you in. The story of a knight or someone who's trying to do something, but also the world you're in. You know, there's these jobs you could do, there's these potential enemies that may be around. Then you head, normally at least, to a city that is based on the city of Chester, just east of the Wirral. I spent many happy years in Chester and met my wife there. And that's all fun and functional. It's full of good tables for a home base, and includes one big potential adversary in Hugh Lupus, who is the kind of master of the city. And there's tables everywhere. You know, the castle has a thing about the Justicar, who is the high-class dog's body of Hugh Lupus. And you roll a table, D4, to see what he's irritated by, but what he is terrified by. You can look at who's in the stocks. That's a table. You could look at what soldiers are currently active. You can see you can roll a table, if you like, about what shop you want to go to on the medieval rows of the Legion's forts, and what options are available for you to buy, things like that, and hirelings and food and drink, and so lots of pretty easy usable things. And again, still on, and then the Demon Bone Train as well, which you can't get onto normally to start with. The Cathedral, then Hugh Lupus, 2-page spread about a major faction. Then you move on to another faction. So that's one spread. The boss of everything, who basically isn't a good guy and may find you eventually difficult, but kind of is willing to use you. Then you move on to another faction description of these scavenger pirates, the Wreckers. And just some, again, tables of names for some of them, a D20 table of that, how they would react to meeting the PCs. Do the PCs seem weak? They'll do this. Murder, in fact. Are they dumb? Trickery. Are they criminal? Recruitment. Are they rich? Theft. And it gives them it gives the Wreckers plans for dealing with the PCs in different ways. And it also gives 2 locations for the Wreckers, including a map of their inn where they lair. Then it has two courts, which are also factions. The court of the Wapentake, which is disturbingly based on a true story. Basically, this solicitor, has got hold of some ancient legitimate documents of power, which he's now abusing to steal stuff off people. And of course, because this is fantasy land, these things are metaphysically binding. So the court of the Wapentake, this baffling, confusing, unreasonable system that you can't understand and which is unfairly weighted against you. The only place you can appeal against the rulings of the court of the Wapentake is the court of the Wir-Heal, which is basically party court. It has a list of games, a D10 list of trials, which are basically weird and embarrassing games. And everyone speaks in verse, and they all kind of speak their own lines of verse, except for a dancing bear, who, of course, he can't speak, so everyone else says, this is a funny scene. But this is also a faction you may find useful. Another faction, the Uzul, actually, the angel Wir-Heal. The angel Wir-Heal was actually the hero of this. You thought you were the hero. Wir-Heal is the hero. He goes around pretending to be a blackbird, but actually he bound the prismatic demon Urizen. He gave masks to the animals of Wir-Heal, so they could become these little mask men who are animals who are upright with porcelain masks that give them personalities. And they're resistant to the curse, so that Ruin would not win. He waits to stop the Titans waking. He will, in a distance way, try to help the PCs if they prove themselves, particularly if they are true of heart, so like your orangutan knight. And he also has, and his blackbirds are also his allies. There's then the Maze of Wir-Heal, which is something you can kind of run as a dungeony environment or as a game, and Patrick does give details about running it as a sort of mini game or board game. And there's the map, which you can use for that, and that is inside the dust cover. And in the middle is bound the prismatic demon Urizen, and who, in some ways, he's created the spectrum of light, so he's behind beauty, but he's also, and he's really nice to the PCs if you meet him. He's also a terrible thing, being a principle of creation, and he mostly wants to kill birds, screw over the PCs, mess everything up. But you might want to go there because there is a magical shield there which tells you more about your quest. It was left there by the knight, who you seem to be walking in the footsteps of as you solve these problems. It's fair to say that the map, as you might have just glimpsed there, is I'll put it up again. It's very beautiful, and it's not completely illegible. But again, these things require some work, which I think it's just worth knowing when you're going into a product. Not that you're highlighting everything to make it at all legible, but that there's a lot of connecting the dots involved that demand of the DM. So you see this is all very dreamlike. It's inspired by the Pearl Poet and by Blake and certainly other poetic influences, and by the landscape of England, and Patrick does talk about that. This is RPG poetry, and it mostly gets away with it. From what I'm saying about you've got to put effort in, it mostly gets away with it. That's not even the core of the adventure, of course. The core of the adventure are the 5 silent titans, the sleeping, dreaming titans. And each of those has a 2-page spread saying who the titan is. Raby, judge of souls, keeper of the dead, cleanser of the cache, she who saves and she who deletes. She was made to catalogue the dead and retain their engrams in hope of restoration. The memory queen is mad. For instance, this is what a 2-page spread looks like. You can see there's then a 6-page spread with a map of the mind of the titan, and then a sort of 2-page spread of the titan's avatars. So your monster manual for that particular titan, part of the endlessly inventive aspect of Stuart's work. Now the 2-page spreads are the regional spreads, we'll call them. They're all very easy, good to use. They've got tables. They say they give you kind of semi-randomized node travel, like you go in this direction, this is where you get to, etc. You could go to a different titan, you could end up by the sea, you could end up back at Chester, at Legion's Fort. It gives you encounter tables, it gives you names of people you might meet there, generally animal people, masked men. Now, I mean, and yes, it gives you locations, 3 or 4 locations usually. For instance, you've got on Raby, you have Southtown, which is bleak and barren moors where everyone is miserable, where you meet them in the village itself and they don't want to talk to you. You might find out some things from them if you persevere. There's Nest Town with our local hero, the Ottoman, Billy Duck, with a muzzle-loading big punt gun. And he can actually help you move in the river, which normally is very hard to do because of his the particular craft he has. And there's a Cap and Hrostia, a huge outcropping of grey stone, with something called the Rieka, who has a story. They've been stealing Raby's ego machines. If you steal Raby's ego machines, the Rieka fades. But they are a clue. They're an engram, in fact. A digital ghost. They are the digital ghost of the PC with the lowest HP, or that you deem most suitable. They are in some way an echo of pasts that have happened, or futures that could happen, or parallel universes that are happening. And they are helping give clues to the PC to get into Raby's Mere, a wild, still, strange pool. Then, in each of these cases, you get this dungeon map or whatever of the Titan's mind. And Raby's mind is fairly clear as a map. Again, it's that sort of ISO view in that style by Detweiler. And you have, each of them I think has 7 locations, and basically you're trying to work your way through the different locations to get to the ego machines, to get the Titan diamonds, to slow down the growth of the Titan and restore order. Now, here again, it's worth saying that the Titan minds are always incredibly inventive. Each of them has a different feel. So there is a kind of broken library feel to Raby's mind. Hilb has kind of clone vats and stuff. Burke is a kind of weird space station-y kind of thing, which is weird because you've just gone in through the ground in the Wirral in fantasy England. But they definitely require more work than the regional spreads. The regional spreads are very easy to use. Dungeon spreads of the Titan Minds are harder to use. Again, you've got to decipher the map. Also, sometimes you've got to relate one segment to another, even once you've worked out the map. And I found that especially with Burke, indeed. And there are also, after the end, so you have these, and then I should say the 2-page avatars. Here's an example. Raby's avatars. You can see you've actually just got a few stats of, I think 4 monsters, 5 monsters in each case, 4 monsters in this case, and then lots of art. And the monsters: translucent android cephalopods, failed engram projections, stained angel of deletion, upload justicars who say bad scan, bad scan. You can see they are thematic. They have prompts and descriptions which help embed you in the setting, and they're perfectly functional in terms of looking at them. The art is enjoyable, but obviously not adding much to your immediate game ability necessarily. You can use some of the add-ons that, like this package of stuff from the Kickstarter had some extra pictures and stuff you can use in play. Miniature flats technically. Brunan, the Lord of Swarms, the Maker of Peace, he who makes drones of men. Sounds like a nice guy. Hilb, Cleanser of Nature, Renewer of Life, Titan of Environments, the Ark Queen. She's basically screwing us over because we screwed over nature. Brom, Herald of the Killer Thought, the Simulator, the Prison Without Walls, the Doorless Cage. Mirrors and Madness, essentially a kind of madhouse in the Titan's mind. And Burke, Lord of Orbits, Master of the Ring, Dreamer of the Void. So those are your Titans. Then you finish with a few pages of stuff to do after, like a summary of this is what the Titan Diamonds do and what they're like, and these are the effects of removal. Land becomes navigable, avatars less numerous, etc. You can, and also telling you what you could do beyond that in the campaign, how to gain experience levels, things like that, and what you can do beyond Wir-Heal. And finally, if you want to bring back Dr. Hogg, if you want to finish the campaign as a closed campaign. So rather than saying, oh, we've got up to level 7 or 8 or whatever, let's go and do another adventure at a higher level, you fight Dr. Hogg again or whatever. Technically Into the Odd, by the way, is levelless, but there are soft levelling abilities, chiefly around you gain d6 hit points. And I mean, technically there's 6 experience levels, or sorry, 5 experience levels, and then they give you particular things. They give you d6 HP, and they give you one other bonus, generally speaking. Now, that is... Oh, and finally there was an interview with Chris McDowell and a couple of notes at the very end from Patrick. And there are also end papers which give you... That's the tables to do with water and what happens when you're on the water. There is the genuinely wonderful map of Wir-Heal, with the Titans are those, kind of that section there to there and so on. Yeah, a few other bits and pieces like that. But anyway, what are the weaknesses of this? Let's talk about what's wrong with this. Well, some organisation issues, like I said. For instance, the key details of how the characters advance in XP or get wealthy or slow down Titan regeneration are not at the start, and they're not on the rules. They are at the end. And that is something where you've got to then have read the whole book and really ingested it to know what your characters... As a DM, you're trying to incentivize your characters to do stuff in a setting where they're going to be more confused than normal, and it's going to be hard because you're going to have really internalized a whole book. As I say, sometimes the mini dungeons of the mines are hard to parse, with segments seeming oddly disconnected, even where they obviously are connected. So you've got to kind of say, okay, I see on the map they're connected, but I'm trying to work out in the text how they are. Or no, they are connected in the text, but I'm not sure how they are on the map. And that's not... That was also a complaint about Patrick's Deep Carbon Observatory, the kind of first edition more so than the revised edition. But it's something where the poetic writing style combined with an emphasis on aesthetics, on the art, is what leads to people criticising art punk. And Patrick gets away with it because he's a genius and very, very good at adventure design. But it is something which is frustrating because you've got to put work into it to make it usable at the table. And the maps, on the same note, do take deciphering, and they are usable at the table. I wouldn't want to say the maps are a massive problem, but they take more than a glance. They are not the same as looking at a blue pencil drawing, as it were, and be like, oh, this room connects to this room. Okay, the characters are off doing that. The strength, though, is that it's beautifully written, as everything by Patrick Stuart is. It's incredibly inventive. And lots of it is in that, you just flick to stuff and it's fun. There's these memory flashes PCs have of previous times they've done this, or future times, or whatever it is. The places you find... So on Brunnen, you find yourself in, you roll your first d6, a slender packed earth trackway running under broken bridges, trees closing on each side. But that is mixed incoherently with empty park, topiary, cut grass, clean gravel or tarmac paths, fenced off play areas. There's this weird thing where you've got, and that is very much the post-industrial landscape he talks about being inspired by, just this immediately resonant environment. And then you go into the Titans' mines, and the rooms are like level design in something like Psychonauts. That's obviously an inspiration here, indirectly or directly. It's very fun. Your heroes being dragged across time and space to come and save the day by storming the brains of sleeping creations of principles of creation, so they stop ruining everything and so people can just get on with their lives. It's also strangely moving, and I think that description of Brunnen, that random selection of things that might be mixed together on Brunnen, is a good example of it. Eric Revilius, the 30s and 40s artist, he really associate with Deep England, these sort of mystical poetic images of England. I think that's communicated, that Deep England feel is communicated really powerfully in amongst the body horror, in amongst the strangeness. You have the story of a knight who isn't here to help, but somehow is leaving clues. You've got the angel Uriel disguised as a blackbird who is using the riddles of St. Aldhelm, the historical St. Aldhelm, to help you work out how to save the day. You can be an orangutan knight who cannot speak but is pure of heart. And I think there's something there which you have to spend a separate moment appreciating, which is that none of that forces a story upon you. None of that forces a particular conclusion. It is a design that naturally leads to memorable stories that are, ridiculous and have their kind of farcical moments. This is an OSR game, right? But they also are going to lead to incredibly memorable, moving things that happen organically, but where the world is set up for them to happen. So it's not a story game, but it's creating the environment for a free-form story that will be really memorable. So I recommend it. It's beautifully produced as well, and the add-ons I got were fun. You can adapt it as well. You could probably very easily adapt it to basic or some other kind of D&D hack, though Into the Odds certainly works well with the very streamlined and simplified way the game is obviously presented. And it is an all-in-one game, which is a compliment, even if it is not really a beginner's game because of the extra work demanded of the DM. But yes, if you've read it, tell me what you think about it, or generally speaking of Patrick's work, and what other peculiarly moving modules can you think of? That feels like a category of its own. What are special, emotionally resonant modules for you? Anyway, until next time.